Good afternoon. My name is Britt Parker, and I'm with the National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, in Boulder, Colorado. Welcome to this informational session on the Climate Program Office FY20 Coping with Drought competition. I serve as the manager for this competition, and I'm joined today by Viva DeHaza, the Executive Director of NIDIS, and Debbie Gallo, a Grants Program Specialist with the NOAA Climate Program Office. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Climate Program Office FY20 Funding Opportunity webpage, along with a transcript of the webinar and a frequently asked questions generated through the Q&A portion of our webinar. This FAQ will be periodically updated with questions that come in so that all can benefit from the answers. We're holding this webinar in advance of the letter of intent due dates as an opportunity to clarify the focus and requirements of this competition. As our goal is to be as clear and consistent with the information we're providing as possible. We will take questions at the end of this presentation. Today, I'll briefly cover what is CPO, what is NIDIS, important details about the NIDIS Coping with Drought competition, briefly go over application requirements, important dates, and then open it up for questions. The NOAA Climate Program Office manages competitive research programs in which NOAA funds high-priority climate science, assessment, decision support research, outreach, education, and capacity-building activities designed to advance our understanding of the Earth's climate system and to foster the application of this knowledge in risk management and adaptation efforts. The National Integrated Drought Information System sits within the Climate Program Office at NOAA, and the FY20 Coping with Drought competition is one of 10 competitions currently open for FY20. The National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, was authorized in 2006 and is a multi-agency partnership that coordinates drought monitoring, forecasting, planning, and research at national, state, and local levels across the country. The mission of NIDIS is to help the nation move to an increasingly proactive approach to understand and manage drought risks and impacts, and to improve long-term drought resilience with a mandate to establish a national drought early warning system. Since its inception, NIDIS has been working with various federal, state, local, and tribal government agencies, as well as a network of researchers, academics, resource managers, and policymakers to support efforts to improve prediction and forecasting, monitoring and collaborating with existing programs and partners to undertake applied research and drought planning and preparedness. We share this work and collate drought resources on the U.S. Drought Portal. While our ultimate goal is national early warning system, we recognize that impacts and information needed differ across the country. So our approach is to achieve this goal is to develop regional drought early warning systems, or DEWs, networks of partners sharing information and actions that help communities cope with drought. Each DEWs has many of the same basic ingredients: observation and monitoring, prediction and forecasting, planning and preparedness, outreach and communication, and applied research, but ultimately have their own flavor to reflect the needs of their regions. These systems are not simply in place to disseminate forecast and information, but to encourage innovation by integrating new, locally relevant drought information and supporting the introduction of new technologies that detect and communicate drought risks and warnings. In addition, we encourage learning across the DEWs and value projects and approaches that are transferable. There are currently 9 DEWs, or drought early warning systems, across the U.S., covering CONUS west of the Mississippi, the Midwest, the Northeast, the coastal Carolinas, and the Apalachicola-Chattahoochee-Flint watershed. Moving into the FY20 competition, information about the Climate Program Office funding opportunity for FY20, including the 10 competitions that are part of this federal funding opportunity, can be found on the Climate Program Office webpage under the Funding Opportunities tab. Please note that the NIDIS Coping with Drought competition is a continuation of the competition of the same name administered by the Sectorial Applications Research Program, or SARP, from FY 2007 to FY 2019. The focus of the Coping with Drought competition in FY20 will be 1. Research to improve our understanding and use of drought indicators, thresholds, and triggers, and 2. Drought impact reporting to inform more deliberate and expanded decision-making to prepare for and respond to drought. Please note that for the purposes of this competition, drought indicators represent the variables or parameters used to describe drought conditions such as precipitation, temperature, stream flow, groundwater or reservoir levels, soil moisture, or snowpack, while triggers represent actions taken at specific thresholds defined for those indicators, guiding drought recognition and response, such as water restrictions, burn bans, or the activation of state drought task force. So NIDIS is interested in research that explores questions that include, but are not limited to, how can we innovate in the arena of impact reporting and purposeful analysis to move beyond cataloging impacts to inform deliberate decision-making, using techniques such as data mining, machine learning, social media, or applying new technologies? How do historical physical indicators compare to impact data? Is the way impact data being collected adequate to set thresholds and triggers in response and mitigate drought impacts? Can't impact data be used to measure increases in resilience over time based on actions taken to decrease vulnerability and mitigate drought impacts? Do reported impacts have value in and of themselves as early warning indicators of drought? To continue, does impact reporting reflect impacts as documented in impact assessments that have been done? And if not, how can impact reporting be strengthened through the integration of lessons learned from impact assessments and then used to streamline the impact assessment process? Is the current impact data collected adequate or robust enough to be used as input into drought vulnerability assessments? And how can biophysical indicators be better integrated into drought planning and mitigation to ensure the needs of the most vulnerable sectors, communities, ecological regions, etc., to ensure they're addressed? So please note that the proposals may address one or more of these or other related questions and should not attempt to address all of these questions. Pending the availability of funds, NIDIS anticipates a funding allocation for this competition of up to $1.2 million. Proposals may request funding for up to 2-year grants in the form of cooperative agreements with funding of up to $650,000 over 2 years. We anticipate funding 3 to 4 projects out of this competition, and applicants should use September 1, 2020 as the start date for their projects. Funds will be awarded through this competition as cooperative agreements, thus assuring a working partnership and substantial interaction between project PIs and the NIDIS program. Projects will be expected to submit annual reports and respond to periodic data and information requests, including quarterly calls with NIDIS to ensure co-production. Some of our most successful work to date has been accomplished when we work together with our partners closely, and we look forward to working with the grantees under this competition. One of NIDIS's mandates is to disseminate drought resources through the U.S. Drought portal. To this end, where applicable, products, tools, and results will be hosted on the U.S. Drought portal at www.drought.gov. Accordingly, all products, tools, and other deliverables produced via this competition are required to be 508 compliant in accordance with Section 508, an amendment to the United States Workforce Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Please pay close attention to the following important guidelines, as successful proposals will do the following. Include partners and decision makers from relevant economic sectors and communities across all levels of government that would contribute subject matter expertise and/or who are beneficiaries of the results of the proposed research to ensure the research results are assimilated, utilized, and enhance planning, early warning, response, and mitigation within the NIDIS dues upon completion of the project. Proposals will clearly demonstrate collaboration and partnership that will take place within the project team. This may include representatives from the public and private sectors, academia, local, regional, tribal, and federal government entities, non-governmental organizations, environmental groups, citizen groups, etc. Proposals will demonstrate relevance to the priorities identified for NIDIS and the regional dues, and clearly state how research outcome will be incorporated into the NIDIS regional dues upon completion of the research project, or should address the research question in a way that would benefit multiple dues. Entities that are eligible to apply for funding under this competition include institutes of higher learning, nonprofits, commercial organizations, international organizations, state and local governments, and tribal nations. Federal agencies or institutions are not eligible to receive federal assistance under this notice. However, federal agencies can send their proposals to the competition manager using the same instructions and requirements to be evaluated by the same process and criteria. If the proposal receives a high enough score through the process, they will receive funding through an interagency transfer versus a cooperative agreement mechanism. I will now briefly cover the letters of intent and full proposals. Please see the full funding opportunity documentation on grants.gov to read the full details and ensure you meet all the requirements. In addition, please ensure you're familiar with the administrative and national policy requirements to which grantees will be subject, also in the FFO. The letters of intent are due at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on August 23, 2019. The purpose of the LOI process is to provide information to potential applicants on the relevance of their proposed project to the competition in advance of preparing a full application. While LOIs are strongly encouraged, applicants are not required to submit them and may submit a full application even if they have not submitted an LOI. If an LOI is submitted, it should contain the following: the competition name to which it's being submitted, tentative project title, names and institutions of the primary investigators, a problem statement, a brief summary of the work to be completed, including methodology and data sets needed or to be collected, approximate cost, and relevance to the competition being targeted. If these are not concluded or the LOI is submitted late, it will not be considered. Responses to the PIs will be sent within 3 weeks after the LOI due date, with an encourage or discourage from applying, though the final decision on whether to submit a full proposal lies with the PI. Full proposals are due at 5 p.m. Eastern on October 28, 2019. Failure to comply with the provisions in the funding opportunity for full proposals will result in applications being returned without review. Full applications are limited to 35 pages, single-spaced, using 12-point font with 1-inch margins on standard 8.5 by 11-inch paper. For proposals with 3 or more PIs, the page limit is 40 pages. The required components of a full proposal include the following: title page, abstract, results from prior research, a project narrative, budget narrative and table, abbreviated vitae, current and pending support, a data and information sharing plan, and statement of diversity inclusion, and this will count against your page limits. Other components that are not included in the page limit include federal budget forms, indirect cost rate agreements, DUNS number and letter of support if you have them. Special instruction for multiple applications with the same project are included in the body of the FFO. Please do not wait until the last minute to access grants.gov, as the process can take as long as 4 weeks if steps are not completed correctly. Letters of intent are subject to a program-led review based on relevance to the targeted competition. Upon receipt of the full applications, an administrative review will be completed for compliance with all requirements, completeness, and relevance. Those that pass We'll proceed to an independent panel technical review for 3 criteria: technical and scientific merit, the overall qualifications of the applicants, and budget. Each reviewer will provide 1 score for each criterion from 1 to 5. These scores will be combined using weighting averages to produce a single numerical score for this step. More information on the weighting of the criterion at this step can be found in the FFO. Projects scoring at least 3.5 out of 5 will proceed to an independent panel review for importance, relevance, and applicability to the program goals, where each reviewer will provide a relevant score from 1 to 5. To determine final score, the scores from the technical review will be combined with the relevance review with a weighting of 60% and 40% respectively. Before we wrap up, I want to draw your attention to a related competition under this same funding opportunity from the Modeling, Analysis, Predictions, and Projections MAP program entitled Characterizing and Anticipating U.S. Drought's Complex Interactions. This competition is soliciting proposals to advance our capability to more integrally characterize and anticipate U.S. droughts in the context of hydroclimate variability and change, and then linking this research to practical NIDIS applications. If you are interested, you can find more information on the same Climate Program Office funding opportunity website I showed at the beginning of this presentation. Finally, a reminder for where you can find the full FFO and the Coping with Drought information sheet. Please read these resources thoroughly to ensure you understand fully the focus and requirements of our proposals. A transcript of this presentation, the presentation slide deck, and an FAQ based on your questions will be available on the Climate Program Office Funding Opportunities website, and we will update the FAQ based on additional questions that come in. Please contact me at any time with additional questions, and we will now move to the Q&A portion of the website. Please type your questions into the Q&A box at this time, and we will do our best to answer all of them. If we do run out of time, we will answer the questions on the FAQ. So our first question is, should the proposed research contribute new methods and data to NIDIS, or should the proposed research build on current momentum? Yep. The answer to this question is it could be either. You could propose new methods and data that could be used by NIDIS and partners, or you could build on some of the current momentum underway. The second question is, could you explain the cooperative agreement funding format and mechanism? And I'm going to turn this question over to Debbie.
I believe there is no set format, but I will double check and put it in the FAQ that's updated on the website.
And so a cooperative agreement is just a form of a grant, correct?
Yes.
With more substantial involvement between the funding entity and the fundee or the grantee. Mm-hmm. But we will put more information on the FAQs. The third question is, the information sheet talks extensively about impact data. Do you have a definition of what is meant by impact data? Observational. So impact data could be observational, it can be quantitative or qualitative, but it is a record of the impact of the drought itself. And I think the other could be, it could be primary, secondary, tertiary impact. So if you think about the relationship between, say, drought and wildfire, you may have a drought that causes drying of fuels. You then have fires. If you have heavy rain events after that, can tie back into landslides. So it can be, you know, any of the impacts along those lines. Another example is tourism, impact of tourism during drought, linking to perhaps low water flows, leading to impacts to a specific tourism industry, but then also the towns, the hotels, the service and support given. So again, those primary, secondary, tertiary type impacts. The next question is there a preference for broad geographic coverage versus focusing on a single dues region? And no, there is not a preference. So either of those approaches would be considered equally. The next question is the two focus areas listed are indicators and thresholds and impacts, but all 7 listed questions really focus more on the impacts. Are proposals just on indicators and thresholds welcome? Yes, we would welcome proposals that just focus on that indicator and threshold relationship. And there's a question, again, can you give an example of impact data? And I think we've covered that question asked by a previous attendee. The next question is it required for an applicant to be physically located within a dues region or an active participant within a regional dues? The applicant would not have to be geographically present in a dues, but as we stated under the requirements, there is a desire that, or a requirement that applicants are clearly demonstrating collaboration and partnership with members of the, or with those within the drought early warning system, and that you're working with partners and decision makers from relevant economic sectors and communities within those drought early warning systems. The next question is there a minimum amount of funds we can request over the 2-year period, or does it need to be $650,000 or more? So it's actually $650,000 or less, but we have not established a minimum amount that could be requested over the 2-year period. The next question is this box for asking questions? And yes, it is. So please go ahead and type your question in the box. The next question is, can you tell us more about what kind of collaborations are viewed as favorable? For example, multiple institutions, cross-disciplinary, number of PIs, academia, government. So I would say that there's no requirement for multiple institutions or for number of PIs. What we're really interested in is seeing more of the cross-disciplinary approach, good partnerships between the primary investigators and those beneficiaries of the research. Again, we listed a number of those under the requirements. Resource managers, state, county officials, local, tribal government. So it's really more, we're looking at those partnerships more so than, you know, you have 4 PIs or you're working across X number of institutions. It's really those deep partnerships that we're looking for.
Yeah, we're also looking for partnerships. So an example, as somebody had requested in this question, if you are looking at a particular sector of the economy or sectors of the economy, we're looking for these PIs, the proposals, the PIs to be working with leaders from that sector so that the impact, the project that is being executed is being done, as Britt mentioned, in coordination with the beneficiaries of the information. So having that sector of the economy be represented in some way in the proposal.
Okay, the next question is, it appears there is not a regional dues in most of the Southeast. What are the NOAA-NIDIS partnerships opportunities in the Southeast where there's no regional dues available?
The primary partnership would probably be with the state governments themselves, and with watershed groups that exist within those states. Those are probably the first order relationships that come to mind.
The next question is, in the information sheet, there's a statement, preference will be given to those proposals that focus on industry and economic sectors beyond agriculture. Could you give more information about this? Are multi-sector impact assessments welcome?
Yes, multi-sector impact assessments are in fact welcome. In terms of the sentence that speaks to the economic sectors beyond agriculture, there is a lot of work currently being done, a lot of research currently being done related to agricultural impacts. And so where there seems to be less understanding about the relationship of drought to impacts is in some of the other sectors of the economy, like rec and tourism, like the water utility sector, like the public health sector. So NIDIS is trying to explore the needs and the gaps and the understanding of impacts in these other sectors. Not that agriculture is not important, but there's already a lot of work being done in the agricultural side.
The next question is, when you mentioned the impact reporter, is that the impact reporter that is run on the same site as the drought monitor, or does that refer to something else? So there is a national drought impact reporter, which certainly if you were doing research around impact reporting would likely be a consideration. But in the information sheet and the funding opportunity, we're talking impact reporting writ large, not just the National Drought Impact Reporter.
Right. And they are both the U.S. Drought Monitor and the Impact Reporter are both run out of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln's National Drought Mitigation Center.
The next question is, does the MAP opportunity anticipate greater emphasis on data analysis and modeling? I can't speak. So I would ask that you direct that question to the program manager of that MAP competition, and you can find that information on the CPO funding opportunity website. I can't speak to the details of that competition. The next question, given the two funding mechanisms, cooperative agreement and intergovernment transfer, how should a Fed and non-Fed partnership proceed in terms of submitting a proposal?
It's pretty much the same way. There is no, let's see. So a Fed should submit their proposal the same way as a non-Fed. There is no difference between them. Except for when the funding is distributed.
But the non-Fed would submit through grants.gov, and the Fed would submit directly. Yeah, and maybe Debbie, you can speak to where there's multiple funding recipients, so there would be multiple proposals with the same information except different budget and institutional information. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
The next question, one of the questions in the information sheet is, does impact reporting reflect impacts as documented in impact assessment? And if not, how can impact reporting be strengthened through the integration of lessons learned from impact assessments and then used to streamline the impact assessment process? Can you discuss this? Is it about assessing the success of the impact assessment reports? That's a good question. So I think that what we were trying to explore there is, are the impacts that are coming in during a drought representative of what we might see during an impact assessment post-drought, and then after, also recognizing that some impacts take time to develop. There's a lag. So it's not necessarily to assess whether or not impact reports or impact assessment reports are successful, but more is what we're seeing being reported during a drought similar or different to what is then seen in impact assessments post-drought. The next question, following up on the impact terminology, when you talk about impact reporting, does this refer to the reporting on potential impacts by NIDIS to the community, or reporting impacts from the community to NIDIS or something else? So we were talking more about the reporting of impacts from the community to NIDIS, to the national,
the state, hazard planning.
Yeah, to the National Drought Impact Report, any mechanism by which to COCORAs through condition reports. So any, so looking at impact reporting from any source, and not just to NIDIS, but you know, to resource managers.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. The next question, so the research question about impact assessments, do you mean official drought assessments typically done as partnerships led by state entities or universities? I'm not clear what types of impact assessments are meant here.
That's what's meant there.
Yes.
Is the types of assessments that are typically done by a state or by a county or by industry themselves post the event to determine what the actual total impact was of that drought event.
Thank you for your definitions of indicators and triggers. Can you please also define threshold in the context of this proposal? So a threshold would be a certain level of indicator at which it would trigger an action. So a threshold would be a defined level of an indicator that triggers an action. The next question is regarding the statement about agriculture in the program information sheet. If a proposal is looking at multiple sectors and agriculture is one of them, but not the only or primary, will this be viewed as less favorable? No. If ag is one of multiple sectors that's being addressed, that's totally fine. The next question, would a proposal to implement a process or method for evaluating impacts on an ongoing basis be suitable, as opposed to a proposal which documented past impacts? For example, if a state agency wanted to collect annual information related to impacts on drinking water systems going forward, but needed support for some IT development, is that something that would be worth shooting for?
Can you go back to the beginning part of that question one more time?
So you're asking, if my understanding of your question is correct, you're asking more about setting up a system versus the research to determine the best approach to setting up a system.
Right.
So we would not be able to fund the IT support for setting up a system. We would be looking more at the, kind of the research to develop a methodology, the best methodology to set up that system. Next question, what do you recommend if an academic wants to partner with a Fed agency? How would that funding work? And I think we've covered that there would be two proposals which would come in, one from the academic partner through grants.gov, one through the federal agency, which would come direct to me, Britt Parker, and then if that proposal ranked high and was funded, the money would flow through two different mechanisms.
But you're not suggesting that the federal proposal looks different, that it's one proposal that has a federal PI and a non-federal PI. They get submitted in duplicate form to each of those, and then if that project gets funded, then the funding then is split. Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha.
Yes. And the budget should be reflected, the federal versus the non-federal in the different proposals. The next question is, do partnerships with relevant stakeholders need to be formalized in the letter of intent, or can PIs be in progress in developing these partnerships at that time? So for the LOI, it's fine if they're in progress, but for the actual proposal, we would want to see that those are established and solidified. The next question is, how would we show that partnerships and different funding mechanisms in one proposal and budget? You would need to submit 2 proposals, as we've discussed, with the same title and proposal and project information, but then the budgets would be different based on where the money is going, if successful. The next question, can an impact assessment be reported from a commercial sector?
I think if I understand correctly, I guess I'll change the way that the question reads. Can a commercial sector complete an impact assessment? And the answer is yes. We have many examples of where industry has done impact assessments. So yes, the answer is yes.
Okay. And at this time, I do not see any more questions. We'll give it another, there's one. The next question, would it be appropriate to propose developing machine learning tool to predict economic impact of a drought? So our interest is better understanding impacts of drought broadly, and however you would propose, whatever methodology you would propose to do that, we would consider.
Right.
Okay, any other questions? We'll give it another couple minutes. Okay, we have a couple more that came in. Is it appropriate to reach out to your team for feedback on whether certain topics are of interest? No, that is what the letter of intent process is for, and so we would ask that you submit your ideas that way, and then we will respond through the review process. The next question, would capacity building and training for drought assessment and planning and cooperation with end users followed by testing of the training in the second year be sufficient scope for this competition?
Yeah.
So we can't comment on specific proposed ideas through this forum. That is, again, what the letter of intent is for. So I would just encourage you to read carefully the FFO and information sheet and submit an LOI to the formal process. The next question, sorry, this is still a little confusing. Perhaps you could clarify in whatever FAQ sheet you provide for the CPO website. Do you want the exact same proposal submitted twice? One copy goes through grants.gov and one copy through the federal agency mechanism. They should only be different in terms of budget. Ideally, you will be considering and reviewing it holistically and not as 2 separate proposals. That is correct, yes.
All of that is correct.
Yep. The next question, if you were to rank the different sectors of interest, e.g. rec and tourism, utilities sector, public health, other, what would be most appealing in funding? We don't have an order of importance, and we would welcome your ideas through the letter of intent. The next question, thank you for the webinar today. Any chance it will be available online? Yes, the transcript should be available, a recording of the webinar, possibly the slides as well as the FAQ will be available on the Climate Program Office Funding Opportunity website. And I wanted to make one comment in correcting something I said. The slide was right when we talked about going from stage 1 to stage 2, or I'm sorry, from the technical review to the relevance review in the review of the full proposals. So those proposals that receive a 3 or above during the technical review will go to relevance. I said 3.5, it is 3, and we will clarify that in the FAQs as well. Let me look and see. It looks like we have another question. Is biodiversity conservation and ecosystem services considered an economic sector? Yes, you can consider that an economic sector. The next question, when you mention lessons learned from impact assessment, does that mean any impact assessment writ large? Yes, that is drought related, yes. Let me just give another minute or so for additional questions. I don't see any right this minute. We'll give it another minute. If you have any additional questions, please go ahead and type them into the question box. Okay, seeing no further questions, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up the webinar. Dragging this out for a moment longer. Well, great. Well, thank you all for joining the webinar, and good luck putting together your letters of intent and full proposals, and we'll look forward to seeing what comes in through the Coping with Drought competition for FY20. Thank you and have a great afternoon.